This contract is so powerful that merely having your eyes exposed to its pixels causes your legal rights to evaporate. If one bit of data is off in the wrong address, or one input is accepted as true when it's false, the computer can either crash or it can do practically anything else a bad guy wants it to do. In California here, we have so many ridiculous things which are just because a law says it has to happen. Every building has a little placard which says, "This building contains chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer and reproductive harm."
Welcome to UFO Talks. Today we welcome Bill Softky, who is a physicist, engineer, and technologist. He lives in the very famous Bay Area. And at some point in your career, Bill, you told me you have been chief algorithm officer. Can you tell me what that is?
I have had a sort of a uniquely perfect Silicon Valley life. I grew up in Menlo Park, the middle of Silicon Valley, where all the venture capitalists want to be. My parents were nuclear physicists, my father a researcher. My brother and I tinkered with things like TV jammers. And then I wound up getting a bunch of credentials and working in a bunch of places. First as a neuroscientist and a physicist, but then retreading to programming and working as a programmer and a scientist, all the way up to data scientist, software architect, and chief algorithm officer is a title I invented because it was one of those places where you get to make up your own title. And so that was it. I used that for about 3 jobs, and it pretty much describes what I did.
Which was? What does it do?
Well, it was basically, when I started, I tried to tell CEOs they needed someone who understood algorithms. And they said, well, all the algorithms are already in the computer science textbook that they learn as freshmen, like sorting. So the CEOs thought that there were only about 3 algorithms in the world, and they had already all been invented. And I was saying, no, when you have all this data moving around, you need to invent new algorithms to process the data. That was a hard sell. I was the only person talking about that, and it was hard to convince somebody to hire me. But when they did, I became the science guy in the corner, dealing with the hardest problems the business had. And if I could solve one of them, that paid for my year.
So, Bill, tell us how you go from algorithm chief officer or chief algorithm officer all the way to following cases in court and talk about hacking the law.
Well, the chief algorithm officer thing just means think about the problems and what's going on at a level bigger than other people did. And at some point, I learned that the principles of algorithms in computers, which include hacking, also included brains, because brains have to process information according to the same rules. We do it differently with different information, but the math is the same for all of us. And the trick about information processing is little bits of information go in and get amplified and do bigger things. Now, in the brain, the eyes move around and they see things, and then they have a target and they go visit or something. In a computer, some inputs come in a wire or through a keyboard, and those move memories around, and now the computer blinks other lights or listens to other things. But if the information goes in the wrong way, in either case, it does the wrong thing. And so computers are brittle. When they're doing everything perfectly, they're wonderful. But if one bit of data is off in the wrong address, or one input is accepted as true when it's false, the computer can either crash or it can do practically anything else a bad guy wants it to do. So once you have something which takes in little bits of information and amplifies it, you have the possibility of controlling that thing by feeding it special information. That's hacking in the most general sense.
Okay, that's hacking in computers. And you spoke in your latest article, you also spoke about hacking nature. How does that work? What's the difference?
Well, if you say hacking has to be about man-made computers, then you're kind of stuck with just evidence of the last few decades. But if you understand how delicate information processing systems can be influenced by other things outside them, which have their own agendas. Now you can go back hundreds of millions of years to when there were these plants, these boring green plants, which had all this pollen, and they waited for the wind to blow the pollen from one plant into another plant to pollinate it and processing it. There had existed insects, these little tiny flying things, which had eyes, which have color receptors, and they help the insects find food. At some point, the plants hacked the insects. The plants started making very bright colored appendages, which we call flowers, which the insects loved. Here's a bright color. It's like the best thing for its eye. So the flower was designed around the insect eye. The insect eye wanted color. The plants gave it color. Then the insect came, it carried the pollen. So a sort of a symbiosis emerged hundreds of millions of years ago
Mhm.
based on capturing the sensory system of a moving animal in order to redirect what it does.
So that's a form of hacking.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, can you explain like the basics of information or information theory to understand it? The
Wow, that's
minimum
cool.
necessary.
Yep. Well, everybody kind of knew what information was all the way up until the 40s. But there was somebody who, but by this time they had radios and amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. And I think they had, yeah, they had television, and there was teletype, and there was telex, and there were all telegraph and Morse code. There were lots of ways of getting information along wires and lots of other ways of getting it on paper. There's newspapers and musical scores. What did they have in common? And the scientist named Claude Shannon basically figured it out. Information is change and surprise. If you already knew this thing, it doesn't count as information anymore. What counts is the part you didn't know. So if a politician stands up and says he loves the people of the country, that's kind of boring because they all say that. If a politician goes and admits he's a crook or something, that's a surprise. So information is basically the surprise in whatever thing you're detecting. But the information is there whether you're interested or not. If it was all, whether you like it and whether you're paying attention to it are slightly different questions from whether the information is there in the signal. And
Mhm.
that is close to what my own research was, but that's slightly different.
Okay. So what happens in court? Because
Well,
you just wrote an article about how hacking happens in the law.
yep. The court processes inputs. Someone used the product by a company and now there's a problem with it. They want their money back, or the product hurt them or something like that. That's one of many things which happen in courtrooms. The particular courtroom we were looking at was for a case where the parents of a child in school in Kansas wanted to sue a company which was providing software which was bad for the kid and illegally taking data from them and selling it to other companies and so forth. And the case in this case is not whether that happened. The parent just wants her chance to explain what happened. The hacking comes when the company claims that because of this magical contract they have created, that parent has no rights whatsoever to even ask if the product is harmful. So the hacking comes when this company made a magic incantation by which that parent cannot sue them. And all of the cases we heard there, all three of them, have the same basic texture to them, where the bad guy, because they're different cases, I'll just say the bad guy comes and says, this case cannot be heard in court because this technicality has occurred.
Hmm.
And this technicality is so important that it means that the case can't be heard in court and so forth. And the simplest way, as I say it in the article, is this contract is so powerful that merely having your eyes exposed to its pixels causes your legal rights to evaporate. You see, once upon a time in the US, so first of all, most laws were not about contracts, they were about social behavior. But
Hmm.
even in contracts, they were about people rather than about the things. And when they were about the people, They had to, let's see, a contract is a fixed piece of paper, and the people interacting are real live humans.
Mm-hmm.
So back in the day, if someone used a product, it was a physical thing, maybe a hammer or a stove or something, and they made an arrangement to buy this, and the stove blew up or the hammer hurt their hand or something. It's clear how long they used it. If you use the hammer for a year, then you probably kind of like it. It's harder to complain if you've used it for a long time. And in fact, the legal principle is if you use something, that means you agree to use it.
Mm-hmm.
The use implies consent. You can't suddenly claim the hammer jumped up and deceived you and stole your money.
That could be different
That's,
for a kid, though, for a
well,
child.
it's different for software.
Okay.
A hammer is something you pick up, you know what you have, and you know what it's doing. But the software they claim is acting like a hammer and should follow the rules of hammers is a bunch of blinking dots on a screen. They literally, the company doesn't even know if the kid looked at the dots or saw the dots or understood the dots, and yet they want the legal system to assume that because the kid turned on the computer and looked at some dots, therefore the kid knows everything about the software, even though they might have lied, and therefore the kid told their parents and the parents could have made the decisions. A whole stack of assumptions. The
Mm-hmm.
company is assuming that yes, they all of these things which could have happened must have happened, and therefore we are rinsed of responsibility because that person was exposed to the contract and didn't back out. This is nonsense. It
Yes.
is utter nonsense. Human brains don't work that way. It's impossible for people to routinely do that kind of thing. And every case in this court hearing is about a company claiming something impossible must be accepted as fact. All of them.
So you're trying to expose these technicalities or magic wands or.
Mm-hmm. The concept of technicalities has been around a long time. I'm not inventing that.
No, no.
But I might be one of the first ones to point out that it is mathematically identical to what we know does happen in computer systems and regulatory systems. A system called regulatory capture, where interests with money figure out how to redefine the regulation in their own interests.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the sense of economics, all of this is inevitable. Of course, money will try to influence the outcomes of things. But when you look at what the outcomes are and how it's happening, it's clear the mechanism is no longer functioning anything like it did 100 or 200 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Isn't it the eternal tension between life being dynamic and ever changing and um, business or maybe
Yes.
some respects religions wanting to fix things on paper and
Yes. That is the deepest question of all. Because for the very longest time, like a million years, human beings just lived around each other and figured out how to get along for the most part. Sometime around 5,000 years ago, we started getting written laws like the Code of Hammurabi and later the Magna Carta and English common law, which actually put down on clay or paper some rules to make sure that the humans now are treating other humans in roughly the same ways, to kind of standardize it. But it still involved people. They involved people reading the laws and thinking and talking and then using the stuff they read to make decisions.
that were
The
those were
biggest change.
laws about
Second?
the first laws were about behaviors.
Yeah, well, all of the laws were about, yes, about human behaviors, and some of them referred to ownership. This human owns this many cattle or this much grain or something. But all of them involved live humans to interpret it.
Yeah.
There might be a clay tablet recording the data, but there wasn't another clay tablet reading the clay tablets and automatically punishing people.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual execution and processing was left to very high bandwidth subtle human beings using these laws as suggestions. Suggestions only. And that was true even when this country was founded and a whole bunch of people were illiterate. Written contracts were not the main thing. And now written contracts are not only the main thing, but other things called corporations are a kind of a contract. So the humans are kind of gone from the process of making sense of the law. And that's how, just like with AIs, utter piles of nonsense can reach very high.
Mm-hmm.
The law can be saying things which are just for instance, one of the companies was claiming that this customer had no rights because they sent an email announcing the change in the terms of service. Well, they have no evidence the email arrived. Their proof is their database server claims that it sent an email. And because it claims it sent an email, it assumes the person got the email, read the email, thought about it, would have operated, looked at the terms and conditions, realized they were wrong, and then quit using the product.
Yeah.
The judge, upon hearing it, Judge Nguyen said, I get thousands of emails a day. I can't possibly read them all.
Yes.
Well, this is the problem. We are legally required to read every email we get. And yet, every human being we know says you cannot possibly do that.
No.
Well, what kind of legal system is saying you are required to do impossible things? A nonsensical legal system.
Mm-hmm.
The same kind of thing in California here. We have so many ridiculous things which are just because a law says it has to happen. Every building has a little placard which says, this building contains chemicals known to the state of California to cause cancer and reproductive harm. Well, it's a placard on the door. You're walking into your doctor's office. It doesn't tell whether you should turn around. It doesn't tell whether you should wear a mask. It doesn't say where they are. But the lawyers are happy because
And
it's following the law.
and if it's everywhere, after a while, no one sees it anymore.
Well, or another one of the ones where, unfortunately, if they see it, it's causing a problem. There are signs on the highway telling you about road work and speed limits and things like that. And for the longest time, those signs were on pieces of wood with
Yeah.
paint on them. But now we have electronic highway signs which flash. They flash one message and they stop. They flash another message, and sometimes the message is broken into pieces. And here's the problem. Problem is, if the sign is road work ahead, 55-mile speed limit will be enforced. You get, as you're driving very fast, 55, it says road work ahead, 55-mile speed limit will be enforced. Well, you've passed the sign.
Yes, probably.
By the time all 6 seconds, 2 times 2 plus 2, you can't see it anymore. So first of all, you are legally required to see something which might not be on the sign when you're in front of it. A policeman could, in principle, arrest you for not seeing the thing which you never saw.
So
And
why don't they do it the old way, simply putting a sign with the speed limit a little bit before the work? It would be easier.
oh, well, the rough problem is that it's so much more fun to sell new technology. And when
Yeah.
someone advertised we have these blinking machines which you can change, it looked like they were saving money somewhere. And nobody kept track of how the bright lights distract drivers, how they mess up your night vision, how they take your eyes off the road. Nobody thought of the other stuff. They just thought of how much money they could make and how much easier it would be to administrate and how cool it was. And so technology in California, being our local industry, is used way too much in way too many stupid ways.
Yeah. Let's go back to the law. So what do
Mhm.
you suggest? What can be done? Do you give a solution or a path towards a solution in your article?
Yep, I think how is it? I'll just read this one. I am not an attorney, so I don't know if the following ideas make legal sense. See, it's a disclaimer. I am not a politician, so I don't know if they're politically feasible either. But as a lifelong engineer and scientist, I know they would have the right effect on law anywhere in the world. And the first one, the law must understand how nervous systems interact with information flows regarding trust. For example, informational toxins, ranging from harsh blue lights to sociopathic chatbots, do exist and cause harm and will continue to be invented faster than any legislature can codify and regulate them. Disclaimers are a joke when applied to subconscious manipulation. So there are some very obvious things where once you recognize that humans process information too, we can't read infinitely fast. Our memories aren't perfect. Our eyes can only move so fast. Our brains can only catch up to driving a car so fast. Once we realize the realities of human information processing, we're in a position to revisit every single law on the books. All of them have to be revisited. You don't know in advance which one is a problem. So
Yes.
the first one is just understanding that natural law and common sense do apply. We can't just pretend to be ignorant of the laws of nature because some attorney told us to. That kind of legal ignorance won't work. The other thing is, there are two other things. One is to bring humans back in. So pretty much anywhere where a machine is doing the enforcement, like a red light camera or an automated judicial system, needs to have humans making decisions. And the final one is the humans making the decisions have to be using the intent of the law and not the letter of the law. The letter of the law is the problem here, the technicalities. And when a technicality jumps in and says you don't get to use common sense, that's the problem. And so in America, this would have to be a constitutional system for giving judges instructions for how to do things the right way. Because right now, too much of the law is telling judges how to follow minutiae and technicalities instead of what we know actually works. So those are my solutions. Understand that natural laws apply regarding information. Use humans to enforce things rather than letting them be automatic, and use the intent of the law, not the letter of the law.
That sounds like an interesting ending. I'm not sure these things can be enforced quickly. And technology is going very fast.
Yes. Well, this is the reason. The fact that technology is moving very fast is the reason not to use it. The law should be something which is predictable. And corporations know this. It's not just individual oppressed humans. Corporations have capital investments which need to be protected by the rule of law. They should be worrying if the rule of law is being eroded in favor of shysters who plan on taking all their stuff.
Well, it doesn't look like they're moving in that direction.
Well,
There's quite a few instances when I get the impression, might be wrong, that the larger the companies, the bigger the monopolies, the more they want to do away with the rule of law.
That seems to be true. It's a little nonsensical as well. Because unless the company plans on hiring its own army, and thus becoming basically a nation state, they have to get along with other entities. And companies and governments have the same degree of stupidity because it's a structural thing, again, regarding information flow. At the top of the company, the bosses don't really know what's going on because they're surrounded by yes men. So a boss who's used to making decisions finds himself surrounded by people who are trying to influence decisions, who have in effect hacked him. So the way that sycophants wind up surrounding leaders is kind of like the way hacking happens in legal systems and computers.
A word of wisdom as a conclusion?
No more words of wisdom. That's the best I can do. I'm just glad that we're real human beings doing these things, and I don't have to spend all day arguing about nonsense to other people who believe it to be true.
Oh, that would be great. Okay, thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Roberta. This has been fun. Take care.
Join the conversation at Fair Observer and subscribe to our YouTube channel.